So, it finally happened. After 15 long seasons, the CW Supernatural finally came to an end. And it died how it lived, messy and disappointing. The series started in 2005 as a red blooded American horror sci fi show starring two brothers who hunt monsters, complete with a cool muscle car, hot chicks, and classic rock. This was a show created by white heterosexual men for white heterosexual men. And yet, fast forward 15 years to November of 2020, as the final three episodes are airing, it seems as if all eyes and ears are pointed to one thing: an epic, slow burn, gay romance between one of the main characters and an angel. How exactly we got there is complicated, and there's a lot to untangle to try to understand how we got from point A to point B. But one thing is certain: this was never originally in the plans of anyone involved in creating this show. Before we get any further in this, I want to make something clear. I am a fan of Supernatural. Not as in I was a fan 5 years ago, but I stopped watching it, as in currently a fan. It's one of my favorite shows, which, yes, should make you raise some questions about my taste, but unfortunately, it's true. I want to note this because a lot of people are making video essays and reaction videos about this show right now, and it feels like very few are people who are actively fans. Which is fine, just because you got tired of the show doesn't mean you aren't able to speak about it, but I do think that the perspective of someone who actually enjoys and cares about this show is useful in this situation, as I feel like a lot of nuances get overlooked or misunderstood when you're looking at all of this from an outside perspective. Just because I'm a fan certainly doesn't mean I'm not critical of the show, however. Quite the opposite. I think Supernatural fans are actually the people who hate the show the most. There's a lot to criticize about it, and I've actually been wanting to make a video on the topic for a while now, specifically about Destiel, but I've decided to wait until the show ended just in case anything huge happened that would seriously change my opinions. And oh boy, is it good that I waited. They really packed a punch in those last 3 weeks, huh? Now, there is a lot to talk about, and I've decided it would be best to split it up into two parts. One about the evolution of Destiel over the seasons, and one about the final season and what went wrong with the finale. This video is going to be a setup for the next one, however, because I feel like you can't fully understand just how messy this entire situation is if you don't know the backstory. So let's delve into it. If you are involved in fandom culture at all, or if you were on Tumblr in its heyday back in the early 2010s, you are probably at least vaguely familiar with Destiel. If you aren't, it's the name used by fans to refer to the relationship between the characters Dean Winchester and Castiel, two of the main characters in Supernatural. Dean is one of the main two brothers that the show follows. The two brothers, Sam and Dean, were originally based off of the Luke Skywalker and Han Solo dynamic. Sam is the down-to-earth, level-headed brother, and Dean is the cool, wisecracking ladies' man of the two. The show begins with the two of them joining together to look for their father, who has gone missing while he was on a monster hunt. While looking for him, they take on their own monster hunts, as they were trained to do by their father while growing up. The first season has a more episodic and formulaic feeling. Imagine a procedural cop show, but instead of cops, it's two hot young criminals, and instead of solving crimes caused by normal criminals, they're hunting down and killing monsters. You get the picture. But over time, the show became more focused on its larger plot, which by season 5 is a full-scale biblical apocalypse that the brothers have to stop. Yes, there are still 10 more seasons after that. But at the end of season 3, a deal that Dean made to save Sam's life leads to his own death and his soul getting sent to hell. At the start of season 4, Dean is alive and digging himself out of his own grave only 4 months after this, with no clue how he was resurrected or who brought him back. It's in this episode that we meet Castiel, the second half of the Destiel equation, who we come to learn is an angel of the Lord and the one responsible for pulling Dean out of hell. At first, he is very cold and intimidating and stone-faced. He is supposed to be an obedient and emotionless warrior of heaven, but over time we come to learn that he's more complex, and through his friendship with Dean, he begins to question the orders of his superiors and eventually chooses to rebel and fall from heaven to help Dean. After this, he gets bumped up to the main cast. He becomes a close friend and ally to the brothers, but especially Dean, and over time he becomes like family to them. He's a fan favorite and eventually is solidified as the third lead of the show. So, that's the very abbreviated plot of the show, but what's up with Destiel? Well, despite the show at first being very clearly catered toward men, there ended up being a much larger female following than expected. It's well known that in fan spaces, especially fan spaces primarily made up of young women, there's a tendency for fans to want characters that they can ship together. People get invested in romance and like to have a dynamic that they can cling to. However, for the first 3 seasons, the only relationship we see very consistently is the relationship between the two brothers. As you can expect, this unfortunately led to a certain group of fans. If the show ever tried to bring in a female love interest that actually had a personality for one of the brothers, such as Joe or Bella or Ruby, they either quickly killed her off or the fans would hate her so much for reasons almost entirely motivated by internalized misogyny that the writers would eventually kill or write her off as well. I should note that this shouldn't be treated like they had no other choice but to kill them off. They very much could have powered through this and given them the focus and development that they deserved. They just tended to find it easier to go ahead and kill them off instead. Not exactly surprising for a show that tended to, at least in the early seasons, either write their women as mother figures, evil sex objects, or cardboard cutout love interests that were usually either also objectified or killed off. Sometimes both. So, yeah, the show didn't provide us with much in the way of women to ship the boys with. And then comes Castiel. Now, not only was he an attractive man that looked good with Dean and had loads of chemistry with him right off the bat, he also wasn't his brother, which was a massive win for the community of fans wanting to ship something here that wasn't gross. Now, I'm aware a lot of the time when a gay ship between two attractive white men gets popular, it's not always for a good reason. Sometimes it's two guys who have a handful of moments that are kinda suggestive that gets blown way out of proportion. Other times they're just two guys who are in a room together long enough that fans point to them and go, "Ooh, what if they got together?" and proceed accordingly. Which most of the time isn't a bad thing, but those are very much fan-created relationships without a solid basis in the source material itself. But I have to tell you that this isn't the case with Dean and Castiel. This is a ship that people clung to for very solid reasons, and the reasons for which only got stronger and more supported by the show's content over time. There are phases to Destiel. The show has had 4 different main showrunners over the course of the show, and each showrunner has had their own distinct way of showrunning that makes it so that there are 4 distinct eras you can split Supernatural into. This is also the case for Destiel. I think each showrunner had a different view of the ship, and therefore the way it was written and the motivations behind how it was written changed over time. Disclaimer. Before I get into this portion of the video, I want to clarify that no, I am not a mind reader, nor am I aware of all the things that go on behind the scenes of Supernatural, as much as I wish I did. I cannot tell you for certain what was going on in every person's mind during their time writing, acting, directing, producing, editing, set designing, etc., while they were working on this show. A whole bunch of people are involved in the creation of this series, all of whom have their own individual and differing opinions on this topic, I'm sure. So any speculation and or generalizing I do henceforth is with this knowledge, and it's all purely educated inferences based on my observations and interpretations of the show, and the things that were said by the people involved in making it. Remember how I said that Dean made a deal that caused him to go to hell at the end of season 3? Well, one of the things that's so great about that season is that you spend the whole time fully expecting Sam and Dean to figure a way out of this deal. Dean is one of the main characters of the show. Surely he can't actually be killed and sent to hell in season 3. They spend so much time focusing on them trying to find a way out of it. I mean, it's literally the main plot of the season. So naturally, we all anticipated that they would find a way out. But then they didn't. And that's one of the best things about that season. The fact that they don't find a way out is shocking. It's unexpected. It makes the entire season pack a stronger punch than it would have had they figured a way out. But here's the kicker. That wasn't supposed to be how the season ended. The original plan was for Sam to save Dean. The only reason it ended the way it did was because of the writer's strike of 2007, which required them to have to make the season shorter and wrap it up quicker. So they had it end with Dean in hell. This, I think more than anything else, is an example of what Supernatural seems to do best: stumble into greatness by accident. In fact, this is the happy accident that led to Destiel in the first place. They needed a new plan for how Dean would get out of hell in the next season. Eric Kripke, the show's creator and the showrunner of the first 5 seasons, has stated multiple times that he never originally planned on introducing angels into the show. But they all decided that that would be the best choice for Dean's savior. This single decision that they stumbled into on accident not only resulted in them introducing Castiel into the show, it also majorly impacted the rest of the show's plot as a whole. It led to what are 2 of their most critically acclaimed seasons, and yes, eventually led to seasons worth of gay subtext and homoerotic undertones. All of this was something that they accidentally fell into. To make matters even more incredible, Castiel was only originally supposed to have a 3-episode arc before he was killed off. They decided to keep him on for a couple more episodes because they liked the character and probably enjoyed Misha's performance, but then fans reacted so positively to the character that they decided to swap him out with the female angel Anna that was originally supposed to be Dean's love interest and give her plot to Cass instead. Yes, you heard that right. His plot was originally supposed to go to Dean's love interest. This show's reluctance to keep any women around results in them inadvertently making their show very gay time and time again. Fans immediately latched onto the relationship between Dean and Cass. They weren't brothers, they were both attractive, they had chemistry, and their dynamic was genuinely very interesting. An angel pulls Dean, a faithless man, out of hell. The angel then begins to question his orders and starts to feel things because of Dean despite the fact that it's forbidden. He then falls from heaven because of Dean's impact on him. At the time, I truly don't believe any of this was intended to be gay. They had to have known that fans were interested in the relationship and that people were shipping it, but that really wasn't taken very seriously by anyone in charge at this point, seeing as slash fiction was still very much thought of as a taboo back then. It's likely that they didn't think of it as very different from fans shipping Sam and Dean at this point. Most of the things that seem gay in between them in seasons 4 and 5 are almost definitely accidental and caused by Jensen and Misha's on-screen chemistry and the plot that they gave them that they didn't seem to realize was very romantic and had serious gay undertones, not only because of their relationship but because of Castiel's rebellion against his strict religious family and Dean's shame and doubt that he was deserving of salvation. This struck a chord with a lot of fans, whether they were gay or gay and didn't realize it yet, or just straight and interested in shipping these 2 guys. Kripke was a showrunner that most definitely did not put a lot of stock into this being a gay relationship, though. His seasons were a foundation for Destiel, but like a lot of the decisions in this show, it was just another accidental stumble into something great. Sarah Gamble took over the show at a weird time. The first 5 seasons had a cohesive plot that all led to the season 5 finale, but now that the show wasn't ending due to its popularity, they had to figure out what happened next. The show had to find its footing again, and that led to Sarah Gamble's 2 seasons as showrunner having some difficulty figuring out what direction it wanted to take. Where do you go after your main characters solve the apocalypse? These seasons are kind of a transition period. Destiel is sort of in a transition period as well at this point. By season 6, the writers have absolutely become aware of Destiel's popularity among fans, and they started playing into it more. Mind you, they did not have any plans to make this an actual textual romance at this point. Whether they had any malicious intent is debatable, but I think that this is when the queerbaiting begins in full force. Queerbaiting, if you don't know, is when a show or a movie hints at the possibility of a gay romance to make gay fans and fans who simply have an interest in that relationship continue to tune in without ever planning on following through with those hints. Queerbaiting is a term tossed around a lot these days, but there are very few examples as well known and as obvious as Supernatural's baiting with Dean and Cass. At the beginning of season 6, the baiting is mostly isolated to jokes. For example, this happens in Castiel's first scene of the season.
I spent all that time trying to get through to you. Dean calls once and now it's, hello.
Yes.
So what, you like him better or something?
Dean and I do share a more profound bond. I wasn't gonna mention it.
Which is like, haha, yeah, that sounded gay, and it's funny because Cass is clueless about that. But that's not the only comment made this season.
Sorry, you have me confused with the other angel? You know, the one in the dirty trench coat who's in love with you?
But I'm thinking maybe it's time you made a call.
Why's it always gotta be me that makes the call, huh? It's not like Cass lives in my ass. The dude's busy. Cass, get out of my ass.
I was never in your...
I don't know if there was an actual thought process like, if we add comments like these, people will come back hoping to see a romance play out between them at this point. I think they likely thought of these comments as fan service and expected fans to know that and not expect anything more. At this point, I don't think many fans really did expect them to do much more. But then came the first major turning point.
Let me tell you my story. Let me tell you everything.
Season 6, Episode 20, The Man Who Would Be King, is the episode that changed the path of the Dean and Cass relationship as a whole, because before that point, there was only accidentally gay moments, and jokes that were obviously meant to pander and nothing more. This episode, however, seemed like an intentionally romantic plot for these two characters. I can't say for sure whether or not Ben Edlund, the writer of this episode, really thought of these two as a romance, but the episode definitely intentionally parallels this to a romantic breakup. It also embeds this relationship as a primary reason for Castiel's motivation for the entire season, and therefore retroactively makes it a critical aspect of the season's plot as a whole. At this point, we learn that Castiel has actually been lying to the Winchesters all season long, and has been working with Crowley, one of their enemies, behind their back. This episode shows us Castiel's point of view, and tells us why he did the things he did. It's set up as a tragic love story. Dean desperately tries to keep his faith in Cass while it crumbles around him, and Cass desperately wants to uphold this lie so he doesn't lose him forever. Cass's secret consorting with Crowley is played like an affair. We find out that the reason he went to Crowley in the first place was because he didn't want to take Dean away from his one chance at a normal life. In the end, we see them dramatically break up. It's all focused on the bond between these two characters, and as much as Cass says that his actions were to protect the Winchesters plural, it's made clear that everything was really because of Dean alone. The intensity of their relationship in this episode is what paves the way for their relationship for the rest of the show. They are framed as a romance without the explicit romance. In the second season of Gamble's time showrunning, however, they tried to kill Cass off permanently at the beginning of the season. Needless to say, this wasn't received very well by a lot of fans. They lost almost 30% of their audience throughout their 7th season and were constantly dealing with backlash from fans asking for him to come back. But even in Cass's absence, the Destiel hints weren't completely gone. They make it clear throughout the season that despite Cass's betrayal, his death is still massively affecting Dean. The pressure from fans finally got through to the writers, though, and they brought Cass back in episode 17 of the season. That episode really played into the Destiel as well, including a scene where Dean gives Cass back his trench coat, which he kept in his car's trunk the whole time he was gone. This scene apparently had to be reworked by Jensen and Misha as they deemed it too gay at first and had to tone it down before they filmed it. So ultimately, Gamble's era as showrunner both upped the ante for Destiel and tried to permanently kill it at the same time. But in the end, it was brought back even stronger than before. When Jeremy Carver took over in Season 8, he came in swinging. Season 8 is still, to this day, known as one of the gayest seasons of Supernatural. If you are reading into the gay subtext and interpreting it as a real aspect of the show up to this point, it's very possible that you could interpret it as a one-sided romance, with Castiel in love with Dean, but Dean not feeling the same way. There's been hints at Dean's feelings, but for the most part, it could be read as unrequited. Season 8 changes that. In this season, there's no possible way that they didn't know that what they were writing was gay. Dean searches for Cass desperately while they're separated in purgatory, only to find out that Cass was staying away from him to protect him, but Dean refuses to leave there without him. When he leaves and Cass chooses to stay behind, he's so hurt by this that he rewrites the events in his mind to cope and convinces himself that it was his fault that Cass stayed behind because that hurts less than Cass choosing to leave him. There's even an episode where he believes he's hallucinating him because he's so distraught over losing him. When they're finally reunited, Cass is then brainwashed by Heaven. They do so by making him kill clones of Dean, and only Dean, thousands of times until he's emotionless. And yet still, when he's ordered to kill him for real, this happens.
Cass! Cass! I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. Cass, it's me. We're family. We need you. I need you.
You have to choose, Castiel. Us or them.
Cass.
Also, it's worth noting that Dean gets a vampire side piece this season that he also has homoerotic undertones with, which is literally paralleled with Sam's heterosexual romance for the season. And there's a scene this season where a guy flirts with Dean, and Dean reacts by getting flustered and seems genuinely interested. The writers knew what they were doing this season. Misha Collins even said that they knew about it and played into it at this point, only for Jensen Ackles to turn around and say the opposite and act like fans were being weird for interpreting it as gay.
Citizen, as you were.
You have a good night.
You have a... Okay.
Here's the problem. I don't think the writers understood that there would be repercussions for making all of this gayer on purpose. They thought they could write all of this in a clearly romantic manner and fans would enjoy it and be satisfied with what they got. What they didn't anticipate was that this would increase the number of Destiel shippers by quite a bit and lead to all of those fans expecting for there to be some sort of follow-through in the story for this relationship as a romance. When Destiel first came into fruition in Season 4, the public mindset was in a much different place when it came to gay romances on TV. It was still taboo. But in the next few years, thanks to shows like Glee and Modern Family, there was a shift. People started to think of gay romances as an actual thing that could be treated seriously in TV shows. So Season 8 resulted in a lot of fans thinking that the show was actually going in a gay direction. But the writers never planned on doing it for real. Because of this, in the next 2 seasons, they had to seriously roll back on the Dean and Cass subtext. They kept them separated way more often than they had previously, and outside of the show, the people involved in creating it were much more vocal about Destiel just being something fans made up in their heads. Despite the fact that we knew that it was at least on some level intentional, they told us that we were just seeing things. But despite the fact that they took a step back with the Destiel content in Season 9, they didn't stop writing it in completely. I mean, near the end of the season, they have Cass choose to give up his whole army of angels to protect Dean, which leads to the villain of the season saying this.
And then, after a rousing speech, his true weakness is revealed. He's in love with humanity.
And only an episode later, he says this.
And the Angel Tablet, arguably the most powerful instrument in the history of the universe, is in pieces, and for what again? Oh, that's right. To save Dean Winchester. That was your goal, right? I mean, you draped yourself in the flag of heaven, but ultimately, it was all about saving one human, right?
In Season 10, they purposefully paralleled Dean and Cass to Kane and his wife Colette on multiple occasions. In Season 11, they used Dean's non-consensual bond with God's sister Amara to contrast his pining for Cass, who was possessed by Lucifer for most of the season. God, saying the plot of this show out loud really puts in perspective how insane it is. But anyway, this eventually leads to a scene where we see that Dean's connection to Cass was stronger than his god-powered forced bond with God's sister. No matter how much they tried to pull back on showing Dean and Cass in scenes together, they most definitely did not stop writing the romantic hints into the show. At the start of season 10, for their 200th episode, which they called fanfiction, they play with the meta-narrative of the show. Back in season 4, we found out Sam and Dean actually have books titled Supernatural about their lives in-universe. This allows for them to have episodes where they interact with fans of the books, which are clearly just exactly the same as the show, so therefore they get to write their own fandom into the story. In the 200th episode, the boys meet teenage fans who are putting on a musical about their lives. They poke fun at people who ship the brothers, not for the first time, but they also mention Destiel in this episode.
I'll have to send you some fake links later.
What are they doing?
Kids these days call it hugging.
Is that in the show?
Oh, no, Siobhan and Kristen are a couple in real life. Although we do explore the nature of Destiel in Act 2.
Sorry, what?
Oh, it's just subtext. But then again, you can't spell subtext without S-E-X.
The inevitable takeaway of this episode is that we have our interpretation of the show and you guys have yours, and we respect your opinion, but it's not actually what the show is about. Which, I suppose it's a step up from being blatantly rude about it, but you can't write all of this romantic stuff into your show, knowing it's going to seem romantic, and then turn around and tell us that it's just our interpretation. It was literally written into the show. Having the writers purposefully write things like this into the story, while almost everyone involved then turned around and told us that we were making things up, was infuriating and mentally taxing on a lot of fans. This was about more than just a ship. A lot of these fans were gay, and then having actors and creators of a series they loved turn around and treat them like they were delusional and creepy for wanting a gay romance that had a very real basis in the show itself was an incredibly upsetting experience. I don't use the term gaslighting lightly, as I know it's a serious thing, but there's no other term for what was going on here. A lot of fans ended up giving up the show in these years because the way the people involved handled it was too cruel to the fans. Take a step back and think about how it looks that for years, fans were repeatedly told not to bring this topic up in front of the actors because it's disrespectful to them, without any thought about how that mindset might be disrespectful to gay fans. For sure, there were people who took it too far, but even if it wasn't something constantly written into the subtext of the show, gay people merely wanting to talk about the possibility of a gay romance shouldn't have been treated like this. It's resulted in other people who aren't fans of Destiel to treat all Destiel shippers like we're just delusional and disrespectful for asking for something that, when you actually think about it, is pretty reasonable. Even the people involved with the show who are more supportive of it often seem to talk about it like it was just this joke or this pornographic fantasy people had, rather than a genuine desire for representation and a fulfillment of a narrative that has been built into the story. To be fair, yes, there is a lot of porn on the internet about Dean and Cass, but that's never been what Destiel was really about. I think acting like that's all it is reductive and not only plays off the tendency to sexualize gay men and act like talking about gay men in general is the same thing as talking about anal sex in graphic detail, but it's also a way to condescendingly treat their primarily female fan base like the only thing they're interested in is seeing two hot guys kiss, as if we weren't able to see past our hormones long enough to actually engage in the story critically. I actually think Destiel shippers deserve some financial compensation for everything they were put through during these years. Carver's era was an interesting one, to say the least. I think that most of the motivations of the Dean and Cass scenes throughout his seasons were just to bait the audience, although I do believe that we started to see a shift in these seasons which we won't see in full effect until the next era, aka a shift from queerbaiting to queer coding, which is an attempt to write them as gay not because they wanted to bait the audience, but rather because some of the writers were making a genuine attempt to sneak a queer narrative into the show in a way that would go over certain executives and some fans' heads. I don't think this was true of all the writers, but I feel fairly certain that at the very least Robert Behrens, who joined the writing team in season 9 and is a gay man himself, and would go on to be the one to write the infamous episode in the final season that changes everything for Dean and Cass, had good intentions when he wrote gay scenes into the show. But it wasn't until Andrew Dabb took over that we got to see this in full force. By the time Andrew Dabb took over in 2016, one thing was for certain. Destiel could not be removed from the legacy of this show. It was always going to inevitably be tied to it in some way or another. They were one of the shows known for queerbaiting. They would always come up in any conversation about the topic. They had more fanfiction written about them on the popular fanfiction website Archive of Our Own than any other relationship in any other piece of media. Destiel has made a major cultural impact, and the tides had turned enough in society that it seemed like there was very little reason for them to not make it canon at this point. Shows all around them were changing. There was a huge push for more minority representation in media in recent years, not just for LGBTQ characters, but for female characters and characters of color as well. But while shows around them started to grow and improve in this matter, Supernatural had remained stagnant. All of their main characters were white guys, and they refused to flat out state that any of them weren't heterosexual either. They were known for treating female characters and the few characters of color they actually had badly, frequently killing them off in horrific ways. Their refusal to actually grow and progress as a show was becoming more and more obvious with every year that passed. By 2016, there had to be people involved in creating this show who wanted Destiel to be canon, or at the very least could see why it would be a positive thing if they did. I could pretty confidently name you several people on the writing team alone who shipped Destiel throughout the Dab era, but nothing happened in canon until the very end of the show, and if you know how that went down, they still had to make that as messy as possible. So what was going on behind the scenes of Supernatural during the last 4 seasons of the show that led to the semi-canon Destiel ending that we got? There was certainly a shift in how Dean and Cass's relationship was written after Dabb took over. They took the romantic vibes up a notch. They had a whole episode that centered around the idea of humans and angels being together romantically that showed Dean and Cass acting more like a married couple than ever before. They had Dean make a mixtape for Cass, which no matter how hard you try, cannot be explained in a straight way. They had a whole 6-episode arc where Cass was dead and Dean mourned him like he just lost the love of his life, putting a distinct emphasis on his grief for Cass, despite the fact that he once again lost his own mother the same night Cass died. Dean literally went from suicidal with grief one episode to giddy and dressing up as a cowboy the next, simply because he got Cass back. They then had them raise a son together for the next few seasons. And then they had a whole arc where they broke up and got back together that was given a lot of screen time in the final season. Also important to note that Dean Winchester, originally introduced to us as a womanizer extraordinaire who would flirt with and or sleep with women almost every episode, stopped sleeping with women entirely after season 12. In the last 2 seasons of the show, we didn't even see him hit on a woman. Hell, the last time he had an actual female love interest that wasn't just a 1-episode hookup was Lisa in season 6, unless you count Amara, which, given he didn't actually have feelings for her that weren't forced upon him, I most certainly do not. Even though this show isn't generally about romance, that's an impressive streak given Sam has had 2 actual female love interests in that time. Cass was the most important person in Dean's life other than his brother, and Dean was always the most important person in Cass's life, so their relationship with each other ended up standing in for moments that would usually be reserved for love interests. So they basically started writing Dean and Cass as a romance without letting them kiss or explicitly state their feelings in the final few seasons. Why did the writers choose to do this if they didn't want to make Dean and Cass gay? I think there's 2 explanations that can probably coexist. First of all, queerbaiting isn't a practice that's meant to last 12 seasons long. If you continuously hint that 2 characters are interested in each other season after season, if you continuously parallel them with other canon romances in the show, if you continuously write them into the narrative with romantic undertones, then the story is going to get out of your hands eventually, and you will have no choice than to either fulfill what you've set up, or write something that will piss off a significant chunk of your audience and feel out of character for the characters you've written. At first, they might have avoided giving Dean a new female love interest because the fans wouldn't like it, but eventually they literally couldn't do it without it feeling off because that role was already filled for him. If they tried to shoehorn in a female love interest by season 12 or later for Dean, it wouldn't work because that relationship would immediately be overshadowed since she couldn't possibly outrank his relationships with either his weirdly codependent brother or his weird, intensely homoerotic angel buddy by that point. Sam was able to have a love interest like Eileen in the later seasons because he didn't have another person like Cass to outrank her. Dean is his family, Eileen is his romantic interest. Sam is Dean's family, Cass is his best buddy and roommate that he's raising a child with at the age of 40. This sounds remarkably like historian accounts that are like, he never got married or took a lover, he only lived with his best friend until they died in each other's arms of old age, platonically. You can try to blame Destiel shippers for this, but the writers are just as guilty because they definitely wrote into it time and time again. They tried to have their cake and eat it too, until the point where the romantic tension between these two characters was so intense that they couldn't let them have a complete conversation alone about anything too intense or emotional, because the logical conclusion would likely be that these characters would kiss each other. This all plays into the larger meta-narrative that I'll talk about in more depth in my next video, but essentially, the writers had no choice if they wanted to write these characters in a way that felt true to character than to increasingly escalate the intensity of their relationship until they reached an unavoidable boiling point. They couldn't do this all on accident, however, which leads me to my second point. There were people working on this show that genuinely wanted Dean and Cass to be in a relationship. Destiel is way too big, it's way too popular, to think that there's no way there were people who shipped it working on the show itself that were trying to do what they could get away with to make them increasingly gayer until they reached that point where it was the only reasonable outcome to have it be written into the show as a canon romance in some way or another. I, of course, do not know the minds of the writers or any of the other creatives responsible for making this show, so this is purely speculation, but I do think it's reasonable to assume that, at the very least, writers such as Robert Behrens, Meredith Glynn, Robbie Thompson, and Steve Yockey were pro-canon Destiel and working the story towards that point while they were writing for the show. There's even been some reports that they may have allegedly conducted some market research to see what the audience reaction might be to canon Destiel all the way back in 2016, which would be around the time where they were getting ready to shift from Carver to Dabb. That brings me to the question of Andrew Dabb's feelings on the matter. I'm not totally sure. I'm leaning towards the possibility that he was generally more positive about it, which is why he allowed a lot of this gay stuff to get through, and why they might have been seriously considering the possibility enough to conduct market research for it, but it's hard to say for sure, especially now after the fallout of the final few episodes. The tone towards Destiel didn't just shift in the show itself, however. Since Dabb took over, the cast and crew have slowly become more comfortable talking and joking about it at conventions and online. Misha Collins even said that there was a point, likely during the Carver era, where they were strictly told not to speak about it, but that in recent years it's become more relaxed. This could just be because society in general has been changing its tune towards gay relationships, on top of them finally just accepting that Destiel will always be something that people equate to their show, but I think that pairing this with the obvious tone shift in the show implies that Dabb's showrunning also allowed for a generally more Destiel positive environment, which inevitably led to what happened in the final season. Dean and Cass's relationship was put front and center in the 15th and final season. Their plot was so significant, I would say it was one of the primary arcs of the season. Carrying over from the end of season 14, they were still dealing with their conflict caused by Mary's death and Jack's involvement in it. For the first 3 episodes, things were very tense between them, and this ultimately led to them properly breaking up at the end of the 3rd episode. And the scene is absolutely played like a romantic breakup.
Something went wrong. You know this. Something always goes wrong.
Yeah, why does that something always seem to be you?
You used to trust me. Give me the benefit of the doubt. Now you can barely look at me.
My powers are failing, and I've tried to talk to you over and over, and you just don't want to hear it. You don't care. I'm dead to you. You still blame me for Mary. Well, I don't think there's anything left to say.
Where are you going?
Jack's dead. Chuck's gone. You and Sam have each other. I think it's time for me to move on.
Now, when we were first going into the final season, I wouldn't say fans had high expectations for Canon Destiel at all. Sure, there was some talk about how this is the final season, and if there was ever a time to do it, now would be the time because they wouldn't have to worry about a loss of viewership. But overall, I think people who were still invested in the series at that point knew what show they were watching and didn't want to get their hopes up for anything more than ambiguity. But with each passing episode of the last season, it was getting harder to ignore the signs. Why would they be giving so much screen time to this emotional conflict between them in the final season of the show if there wouldn't be some sort of payoff? Then they brought back Eileen as Sam's love interest in the final season, and things got even more suspicious. Why would they give Sam a love interest in the end and not Dean? Why were they specifically paralleling these two relationships if Cass wasn't Dean's love interest? Their breakup arc ultimately ended up lasting 12 episodes if you include the season 14 episodes as well. That's a lot of time to devote to something that won't play an important role in your endgame. It all came to a head in episode 9 when the two of them had to go to Purgatory alone together. Purgatory is a place that has always been very important to Destiel fans, because their arc there in Season 8 had some strong romantic implications, so the fact that they had them go back there definitely raised some eyebrows. While they're there, they get separated and Cass is kidnapped by Leviathan. Dean, worried about whether Cass is still alive and unsure if he'll be able to get him back before they run out of time and the portal back to Earth closes, decides to pray to Cass to apologize. It's very emotional and leads to him falling to his knees and weeping over him, and while nothing in it is explicitly romantic, it's very easy to interpret it as a romantic scene. After this, they're back on good terms, and their plot takes a back seat for a while. But was that the whole point of that arc? Was it just so we could see Dean cry and apologize to Cass? I mean, he admits he has anger issues in the apology as well, which is certainly a big step for him, but it felt like there had to be more to this. And yes, there was definitely more. Back in Season 14, to save Jack's life, Cass made a deal with the entity that controls the Empty, which is a place where demons and angels go after they die. Cass has some old beef with the Empty, so he proposed that instead of taking Jack, it could take him. The Empty agreed, but said it wouldn't take him immediately. It would take him the moment he allows himself to be truly happy. When this episode first aired, it was fair to say that Destiel shippers all collectively said, "Huh." Because surely that could only mean one thing, right? Surely there's only one thing that could make Cass truly happy, right? But no, we knew how this show was. It would have to be something different. They weren't going to actually address that. Right? Well, this deal was still hanging over all of our heads throughout the 15th season, and the more time that passed where the deal didn't come back up, the more we got a feeling of nervous excitement. Excited because it increasingly looked like there really was only one thing that could make that deal happen. Nervous because the closer it got to the end of the show, the more it became likely that this deal would be Cass's endgame. Something that a lot of people who came rushing back to the show after episode 18 don't know is that the current fans of the show knew that Cass was going to die because of the Empty deal in that episode, and that it would happen in a scene where he was alone with Dean for months before it aired. We knew enough about the things happening on set to piece it all together, so we had the entire quarantine hiatus to deal with this. So before episode 18 aired, the only question on our minds was, are they going to do it? Even though all arrows pointed to yes, it still felt unlikely that they would do anything explicitly gay with them. If anything, it would be ambiguous. But we still reluctantly had our hopes up. And then the episode aired, and we got the love confession.
I always wondered, ever since I took that burden, that curse, I wondered what it could be, what my true happiness could even look like. And I never found an answer. Because the one thing I want, it's something I know I can't have. But I think I know now. Happiness isn't in the having. It's in just being. It's in just saying it.
What are you talking about, man?
I know how you see yourself, Dean. And you think that hate and anger, that's what drives you. That's who you are. It's not. And everyone who knows you sees it. Everything you have ever done, the good and the bad, you have done for love. That is who you are. You're the most caring man on earth. You are the most selfless, loving human being I will ever know. You know, ever since we met, ever since I pulled you out of hell, knowing you has changed me. Because you cared, I cared. I cared about you. I cared about Sam, I cared about Jack. But I cared about the whole world because of you. You changed me, Dean.
Why does this sound like a goodbye?
Because it is. I love you.
And yes, this was immediately followed by his death. So while people who weren't interested in the show found out about this and saw it as something blatantly homophobic because it was an obvious example of barrier gaze in probably the cruelest way possible, those of us who were interested in the show were on cloud nine because they did it. We were vindicated. That doesn't mean we weren't aware of the homophobic implications. We knew. Of course we knew. But we also had months to prepare for this death. The only new information for us was this love confession. We had something that we had been saying for years, something that we were called delusional for seeing, something we had committed so much time and energy into, confirmed. It was incredibly validating, and I don't think I will ever experience something quite like the rush of watching that episode live ever again. Which is why you could see such a big discrepancy between the reactions of people who weren't fans and those of us who were. That, on top of the fact that if you watch that scene out of context, Dean's non-reaction certainly seems odd. So people who weren't caught up or just don't know anything about Dean's character thought of this as Jensen Ackles playing the scene badly, or assumed Dean was homophobic and straight. Those of us who knew the context were aware of how bad Dean is at processing and expressing his emotions on a good day, much less a day where his friends are getting killed, he's being hunted down by death, and his best friend tells him he made a deal that will kill him, which apparently he's choosing to bring up right now because he's going to use it and die right now, and the thing that's ultimately going to kill him is his secret love for him that he's going to confess by showering him with adoring compliments, which Dean is notoriously bad at accepting because he hates himself, and then said best friend dies right in front of him to save his life. He had like 2 minutes to process all of that. Give the guy a break. If he was able to process all of that and confess his secret love for his best friend that he's been too scared to admit for over a decade in that span of time, he would not be Dean Winchester. There's also the fact that there was still a possibility that this wouldn't be the end of things. We were unclear on whether or not Misha filmed during the last 2 episodes because they purposefully seemed to make it a mystery while they were filming. And when asked after episode 18 aired, Misha refused to say whether or not he was in the finale. No one tweeted goodbyes to Misha like they normally would after a character who has been on the show for a long time is killed off for good. Death is rarely ever a permanent end in Supernatural. Cass has already died about 5 times over the course of the show. There were still 2 episodes left, and while that scene did feel like Cass's last big hurrah, that didn't mean he couldn't come back in some way in the finale. Surely the show wouldn't end his plot in such a bleak place, especially when they had made the empty and even worse ending for him this season by telling us that it isn't just peaceful sleep forever, it's actually reliving your worst regrets over and over again forever. They couldn't do that to him or the fans. Plus, the confession scene never let us know how Dean felt about Cass. He didn't get a chance to respond. This story was unfinished. And that's only a handful of reasons why fans thought it was very likely for Cass to come back. So this didn't feel like a sad occasion yet, it was cause for celebration. Destiel was canon. And then, well, I'm gonna leave the discussion about the treatment of Destiel in the last 2 episodes for my next video. But ultimately, the way that this show has interacted with this gay relationship that they accidentally fell into, and their reactions to fans who have grown attached to it, is incredibly unique to Supernatural and Supernatural alone. The interactions between the fans and the cast members about this topic, both in positive and negative ways, changed the way we looked at fandom and shipping as a whole. Fans saw the potential in Dean and Cass's love story, and because of this, it ended up being built into the show. If it weren't for Supernatural, Destiel shippers wouldn't exist. But if it weren't for Destiel shippers, Supernatural wouldn't have progressed the way it did on multiple levels. This was a weirdly toxic, symbiotic relationship that somehow built this incredible gay love story unlike any other along the way, even if it happened begrudgingly and disdainfully. Tune in next time where I delve into the final season of Supernatural, the meta-narrative of the show, how they were so close to a revolutionary, incredible ending, and why the final 2 episodes were such a crushing disappointment. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed and are interested in seeing part 2 of this essay, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. I hope to get part 2 out as soon as possible, so stay tuned. As I said in my last video, I have yet to figure out a good signing off phrase, so I'm going to continue to come up with random ones until I find one that fits. So, catch you later, alligator. Oh no, I hated that one as soon as I started saying it. Better luck next time, I guess.